Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a real scientific detective story. We're going to decode Nikola Tesla's unwritten physics. Let's get right into it. Picture this. It's January 7th, 1943, room 3327 in the New Yorker Hotel. Nikola Tesla has just passed away, alone and in debt. And, almost immediately, the FBI sweeps in and raids his room. They literally seize about 2 whole truckloads of documents, notebooks, equipment, the whole shebang. Now, some of these papers eventually made their way to a museum in Belgrade. Some are still classified to this day. And, well, some just vanished completely. It makes you wonder, right? What exactly were they looking for? And even more importantly, what groundbreaking physics was lost in that missing paper trail? You've probably heard this famous quote before. If you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. But for Tesla, this wasn't just some catchy bumper sticker. It was his core ontological belief. He genuinely believed that frequency and resonance were the actual physical building blocks of reality. We're not talking about solid particles or objects here, but pure oscillating energy. So what was actually in those missing boxes? Well, we're trying to piece together the complete, rigorous systems that he held perfectly in his mind, but never fully formalized on paper. These lost documents are basically the holy grail of his cognitive output. We're talking about his unwritten physics, his lost unified theories, and some really profound mathematical intuitions. He was operating right at the absolute boundary of what the mathematics of his era could even express. And that's because Tesla had a completely unique way of thinking. Think about standard physics for a second. It usually abstracts reality into particles and equations first, right? You find the rules through math. Well, Tesla did the exact opposite. He thought entirely in phenomena. He could run a full 3-dimensional simulation of an electric motor in his head for weeks, check the invisible bearings for wear and tear, and do all of this without ever touching a single equation. He saw the waves, the resonance, and the 3D visualizations first. The math? Well, if I came at all, it was totally an afterthought. At the heart of his entire worldview was this one massive idea: frequency as ontology. For Tesla, the universe wasn't just a bunch of isolated objects bumping into each other like billiard balls. No, it was a massive collection of resonating systems. His thinking was, if you knew a system's resonant frequency, whether that's a bridge, the planet Earth, or even the human body, you basically held the master key to the universe. You could transfer energy into it with perfect efficiency, or if you wanted to, you could completely tear it apart. Now, if we act as translators for a minute, this really fascinating pattern starts to emerge. See, Tesla used 19th century terminology, which honestly sounds a bit outdated to us today. But when you map his words directly onto modern physics, the parallels are absolutely stunning. What he called the ether maps perfectly to our modern quantum vacuum. His Wardenclyffe global resonance, that's the Schumann resonance. And his therapeutic oscillator maps right onto today's transcranial magnetic stimulation. He wasn't wrong at all. He just didn't have our modern vocabulary. Let's actually dig into that first translation. Tesla passionately defended this idea of the ether against Einstein's concept of empty spacetime. Tesla argued that space literally couldn't be empty. It had to have physical properties. And guess what? He hit the nail on the head. Modern quantum field theory describes the active vacuum. It's this seething ground state of quantum fields and zero-point energy, basically like a boiling ocean of invisible potential. Space is absolutely not empty. So while Tesla's specific mechanical model of the ether was off, his underlying intuition that the vacuum actively participates in physics was spot on. And this active vacuum directly informed his dynamic theory of gravity. Instead of gravity being this pulling force that originates from mass, Tesla envisioned a total paradigm shift. He saw it as a push. He conceptualized mass as something that actually damped the oscillations of the ether, which created regions of lower pressure. So in his unwritten physics, gravity was simply the consequence of radiation pressure gradients in this oscillating medium, actively pushing objects together. Okay, so that brings us to one of his most famous and honestly most misunderstood projects, the Wardenclyffe Tower. His big idea was to use the Earth and the ionosphere as a giant resonant cavity. He didn't just want to transmit communication, but actual physical power to the entire globe. But here's the million-dollar question. Could it actually power the globe? Well, here is the brutal truth. 10 to the power of -5 watts. If we run the modern calculations on his Wardenclyffe system today, a receiver sitting on the other side of the planet would pick up maybe a fraction of a milliwatt. That's barely enough energy to light up a single LED for a fraction of a second. So we have to cleanly separate his fundamentally correct theory of global resonance from his incorrect engineering scale. The cavity of the Earth is simply way too lossy to transfer power like that. But hey, let's definitely not dismiss him, because his underlying theory, it was incredibly accurate. Decades before the German physicist Winfried Otto Schumann theoretically formalized this back in 1952, Tesla had already predicted that the Earth ionosphere cavity acts as a resonant system. Tesla estimated the global resonant frequency to be right around 6 to 8 hertz, and modern science later confirmed it sits exactly at 7.83 hertz. It's crazy. He basically measured the heartbeat of the Earth long before we had modern computers to do it for us. And the thing is, he didn't just stop at the planetary scale, he also looked inward. Tesla viewed living systems as biological electrical oscillators. He built these therapeutic oscillators and would literally pass currents through his own body, claiming it restored his health by fixing the body's natural resonant frequencies. For decades, everyone just ignored this. Yet today, we have FDA-approved therapies like transcranial magnetic stimulation and pulsed electromagnetic field therapy that use exactly this principle. They apply specific magnetic frequencies to do things like heal depression or even mend broken bones. But, this incredible visionary scaling, going from the human body all the way to the entire planet, ultimately led to the great tragedy of his career. Tesla worked alone, and his ideas required massive amounts of capital. When J.P. Morgan realized that Guglielmo Marconi could transmit a simple radio signal across the Atlantic using much cheaper, simpler technology, the brutal logic of capitalism just took over. Morgan withdrew his funding. The market rewarded sufficiency. And Tesla's foundational, groundbreaking physics was utterly stranded simply because it couldn't be instantly monetized. Though, to be fair, the lack of money was only half the problem. Think about Einstein for a second. Einstein had brilliant intuitions for sure, but he collaborated with mathematicians like Hermann Minkowski, who gave special relativity its rigorous geometric formalization. Tesla had pure intuition but zero mathematical collaboration. He stubbornly worked alone. And the immense cost of that isolation was that his incredible ideas were never translated into the mathematical language that the physics community demanded. And that's why the ultimate tragedy is that his vindication arrived far too late. Time and time again, modern science has validated his underlying intuitions. In 1899, he predicts Earth's resonance. It's confirmed in 1954. He builds a magnifying transmitter based on resonant coupling. MIT formally characterizes near-field resonant coupling for wireless power in 2007. He says the medium of space oscillates, and then in 2015, we finally detect gravitational waves, which are literal ripples in the fabric of space. Which finally brings us to Tesla's unwritten future. Modern theoretical physics is essentially just catching up to the questions that Tesla was asking over a century ago. Theories at the absolute cutting edge of what we're just now trying to figure out. Things like loop quantum gravity and spin foams, they suggest that space isn't just a passive container but an active, discrete network. Space-time itself might literally emerge from the coupling of different oscillating quantum modes. It is basically the ultimate vindication of a universe built entirely on frequency. Let's actually take this all the way down to the Planck scale. That's the smallest possible measurement in physics, oscillating at an absolutely incomprehensible 10 to the 43 hertz. At this extreme high-frequency scale, modern physics suggests that space itself emerges from the resonant relationships between entangled quantum systems. The distance between 2 points is literally defined by how strongly their quantum frequencies are coupled. Guys, this is exactly what Tesla intuited, just pushed down to a scale he couldn't possibly measure at the time. So, I want to leave you all with a bit of a provocative thought. Think about all those missing boxes of papers sitting in room 3327. Think about a man who could run a simulation of the universe in his mind, but just didn't have the math to write it down. How much further along would human civilization and modern physics as a whole be today if Nikola Tesla had just found his mathematical collaborator?